hat sich natürlich aktiv betätigt und war sicherlich als Cousin.
Some stories are hidden, buried deep in history books. Others are weighed down by shame, never to be told. But occasionally, one slips through the cracks, gasping for air, trembling, desperate to be heard before it's too late. For 70 years, Johann Schmidt Junior carried a name he never chose, a legacy that darkened every corner he walked into. He was more than just a man. He was Hitler's cousin, and for most of his life, he did everything he could to forget it. Yet now, as time slips away, Johann is ready to speak. To share the truths he holds about the man the world fears, Adolf Hitler, history has long painted Hitler as a monster. But what if someone close to him, someone who shared his blood, saw him differently? What if there's more to the story than the monster we've all been told about? To understand what Johann saw, we must ask, who was Hitler before the world knew his name? Adolf Hitler wasn't always the monster we remember. That's the part no one wants to admit. Monsters aren't born, they're made, slowly, quietly, with each decision, each belief, each lie. Born in 1889, in a small Austrian town, Hitler's early life was, in many ways, unremarkable. As a boy, he wasn't the person he became. He had dreams of being an artist, spending hours drawing, hoping to attend art school. But those dreams were crushed when he was rejected not once, but twice, from the Academy of Fine Arts. In Vienna, each rejection pulled him deeper into bitterness, and the world around him began to feel colder, darker. As he wandered the streets of Vienna, penniless and filled with resentment, he sought someone to blame, and he didn't have to look far. He immersed himself in hateful propaganda, reading anti-Semitic newspapers and listening to the venomous conversations in the city's cafes. Over time, the hate started to make sense to him. It became his truth. When World War I broke out, Hitler enlisted in the army not as a leader, but as a simple messenger between the trenches. He received medals, but when Germany lost the war, something within him snapped. He wasn't just angry, he was humiliated. And it was in that humiliation that his rise began. Germany was in ruins, its economy shattered, its people desperate. Hitler, with his skill for stirring the masses, gave them someone to blame. He joined the German Workers' Party and quickly took charge. His voice didn't soothe, it riled people up. He didn't speak to their hearts, but to their anger. His speeches matched the rage of a nation desperate for hope. Soon, the party became the Nazi Party. In 1923, Hitler attempted a coup. It failed, and he was sent to prison. There, he wrote Mein Kampf, laying out his vision of a pure Germany filled with hate, fear, and dangerous ideals. At the time, few paid attention, but they should have. When he was released, Hitler shifted tactics. Instead of violence, he sought power through politics, using legal means to climb the ranks. When the economy collapsed once again, he capitalized on the chaos, promising jobs, stability, and national pride. People believed him, and in 1933, Hitler was named Chancellor. It was supposed to be a compromise, but it marked the beginning of a nightmare. Once in power, Hitler discarded all norms, silenced his critics, and dismantled Germany's democracy. By the time he was crowned Führer, the country had changed forever. Roads were built, factories reopened, and people cheered. The surface, cruelty festered. Jews were forced out of jobs, books were burned, and people disappeared overnight. What started as rhetoric soon became law, and that's when the war began, in 1939, marking the start of humanity's darkest hour. But before he became the face of terror, before the speeches in the marshes, Hitler was just a man who sat at family dinners, ate meals, and spoke. Little Johann remembers these moments, the quiet, uncomfortable presence of his infamous cousin. It wasn't Hitler's words that made people uneasy. It was the way he watched, the way he never spoke. Because before Hitler was feared by the world, he was just another relative in the room, someone whose very presence felt like a pressure. There was a familia, fractured, broken family. Hitler was born to Alois Hitler, a man with a quick temper and a need for control. Alois ruled their home like a tyrant, while Hitler's mother, Clara, was soft, gentle, and religious, and his younger sister Paula survived childhood. Paula was quiet, shy, and didn't seek attention. They were siblings by blood, but they weren't close in any real sense. Dinners were formal, with Alois's voice booming through the room, while Adolf quietly observed. He learned early to blend into the background, to disappear. His family became more distant. He became someone who lived in the shadows of his own home. Even his half-sister, Angela, with whom he shared a father but not a mother, was once a part of his life, but not for long. Running smoothly at his various homes, but even she couldn't avoid the coldness that consumed him. The only person he allowed close to him was Jelly, Angela's daughter. Yet, even that relationship was shrouded in tragedy. Jelly died at just 23 in Hitler's apartment, a mysterious death that still raises questions today. After Jelly's death, Hitler withdrew further. He distanced himself from his family, cutting ties in quiet, permanent ways. He forced Paula to change her last name, making sure she was never publicly associated with him. He supported her financially, but remained emotionally distant. The family that once shared meals together now seemed like strangers, and Johann could feel the distance growing, the walls closing in. Johann Schmidt Junior, though distant, witnessed it all. He saw how Hitler's cruelty affected the family, how they became invisible, forgotten, pushed out of the picture entirely. Johann remembers the unspoken rules, how people avoided speaking of Jelly, how Paula was erased, how even the slightest connection to Hitler brought fear and isolation. The time the world knew Hitler as Führer, his family was gone, either forgotten or pushed aside. He remembered the tension in the room, the way people couldn't meet Hitler's gaze, the way his presence made everything feel uneasy. This is the Hitler the world never saw, and it's the version Johann could never forget. Before Hitler became the infamous figure we know, there was Johann, watching, remembering, seeing the cracks before they shattered the world. This is his story, the story we never heard until now. In the countryside of Austria, Johann Schmidt Junior's last name meant nothing. It was just another name in the family, something that didn't carry weight or expectation. It wasn't until much later, when the world would change, that the name would turn into something far more powerful, something that would change Johanni's life forever. The last time he saw Adolf Hitler was in 1907, during a family visit. Hitler was a teenager then, already distant, already different, but not yet the man he would become. He didn't join in the play or the laughter. Instead, he observed quietly, that moment would mark their last encounter. By 1945, the world had been forever scarred by the events of the war, themselves guilty by association. And so, the Soviet agents came for Johann when he was just 18. Along with him, they took his father, Johann Sr., his mother Maria, and two cousins, Edward and Agnes. They were accused of knowing too much about Hitler's plans against the Soviet Union. Though nothing could be proven, it didn't matter. They were arrested and sent to a Soviet labor camp. The conditions were brutal. Survival was a constant battle, with scarce food, diseases spreading like wildfire, and guards enforcing cruelty at every turn. Johann lost his entire family to the camp. His father, mother, and cousin Edward died there, victims of the harsh conditions. Not bullets, but hunger, cold, and relentless labor. His cousins, Maria and Agnes, also perished under the oppressive weight of their captors. In 1955, he left a broken man, physically wounded, but alive. Returning to Austria, the home he once knew was unrecognizable. His town had grown quiet, and his house was gone. His family, his parents, his home, everything was lost. What remained was the shadow of his name. People recognized him but avoided him, some staring in fear, others with suspicion. Still, Johann kept living, trying to rebuild his life. He had inherited a name that carried too much history, too much pain, too much guilt. For years, Johann stayed silent, a deep, learned, and ingrained fear. You see, in Nazi Germany, punishment extended beyond the accused. This was a concept known as Sippenhaftung, or family arrest, connection. Johann learned this lesson early on. Even after the war and Hitler's death, Johann wasn't free. He was hunted. Interrogations came at random times, often in the dead of night. He was accused of things he couldn't explain, his words twisted into confessions that weren't his own. Silence became his defense. His survival depended on it. And while Johann rebuilt his life, his silence continued to haunt him. People would wonder, what did he know? Did he know about the Holocaust? This wasn't just one act, one moment in time. The Holocaust was a slow, calculated effort to wipe out entire groups of people, 6 million Jews. Along with Roma, disabled individuals, political dissidents, and anyone deemed unfit for the perfect world Hitler sought to create. It started with laws and boycotts, then escalated to ghettos and death camps like Auschwitz and Treblinka. The brutality of the Nazis was unimaginable. Some of Hitler's family members, like Johann, claimed they didn't know anything. Others said they knew more than they were willing to admit. Speaking out would mean reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. It would bring him, and possibly others, back into danger. His trauma wasn't just from what he endured in the camps, it was from what he witnessed happening to the people. Around him, he lived with the weight of their suffering, their deaths, and the burden of survival. His silence wasn't about guilt, but about survival. Johann wasn't the only one to bear the weight of this inherited shame. Maria Schmidt, Johann's cousin, was also caught in the web of guilt by association. She had been quiet, not involved in politics, but her last name was Schmidt, and that was enough. In May 1945, Soviet agents came for her husband Ignaz, and Johann's father and cousin. They were taken to Lefortovo prison in Moscow, where Maria endured endless interrogations. Years of hard labor in the cold, remote camps of the Urals. She died in 1953. A casualty of a crime she never committed, Edward, her brother, didn't fare much better. Already sick with tuberculosis, when arrested, he was interrogated relentlessly. His confession coerced. He died in 1951, a broken man pleading for proper medical care in his final letter. Ignaz, too, died in prison in 1949, regretting the day he had married into Hitler's family. None of them were soldiers or political leaders. They weren't responsible for the atrocities. They were farmers, clerks, and ordinary people. But their connection to Hitler made them targets. They faded away because they made the choice to disappear. Adolf's half-sister Paula lived under a different name, avoiding the public eye until her death in 1960. Across the ocean, William Patrick Hitler, Adolf's half-nephew, left Germany, joined the U.S. Navy, and changed his name to William Stewart Houston. He wanted nothing to do with the family legacy. His children knew their lineage, but chose not to pass it on. The other relatives, when they passed, their stories died with them. They chose silence to let the name die with them. And as for Johann, after 70 years of silence, he's finally ready to speak. He's not speaking to clear his name, but to close a door that's been open for far too long, letting the weight of the past linger, and of the slow fading of a name that carried too much history. And now, as the last living relative of Hitler's family speaks, the world will finally hear the story that's been buried for so long. The city's defenses had collapsed, but Hitler refused to face the truth. One of the generals, Felix Steiner, was ordered to launch a final counterattack, but he couldn't. There were no troops left to command. When Hitler found out, he screamed in rage. It was the last time his staff saw him lose control in that way. On April 23rd, betrayal came from two of Hitler's closest men. Hermann Göring, once seen as Hitler's successor and the head of the German Air Force, sent a telegram to Hitler declaring that, since he was cut off, he was ready to take over. Hitler saw this as nothing short of betrayal. He stripped Göring of all his positions and ordered his execution. At the same time, Heinrich Himmler, leader of the SS and the man behind the concentration camps, took matters even further. He secretly tried to negotiate peace with the Allies. He ordered Himmler's arrest immediately as the end drew near. Hitler began crafting what he called his final political statement. He blamed the Jews, the communists, and everyone but himself. Then, in a surprising turn, he married Eva Braun, who had been by his side for over a decade, always in the background. Now, as death loomed, she stepped forward and became his wife. But there was no joy in this union. It was more of a farewell than a celebration. On April 30th, the two of them entered Hitler's private study. A few minutes later, the silence was shattered by a gunshot. Heinz Linge, Hitler's valet, and Otto Gunge, his personal aide, were the first to find the bodies. Eva had taken cyanide, and Hitler had ended his life in the bunker. When his staff discovered them, the scene was exactly what they had feared. Following Hitler's instructions, Linge and Gunge carried the bodies outside, laid them in a shallow crater in the garden, and cremated them. Just a quiet death in the ashes of a crumbling war. The next day, Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda chief, killed his own children by giving them a sleeping substance, ensuring they wouldn't wake up. After that, he and his wife chose to end their lives as well. One by one, Nazi officials followed suit, each choosing death for reasons tied to loyalty, fear, or something darker no one could fully explain. On May 2nd, Berlin surrendered, and 1 week later, Nazi Germany ceased to exist. But even in the wake of Hitler's death, the horror didn't stop. Some walked for miles in snow, barefoot, with no food. Thousands perished even. After the surrender, far away from Berlin, people like Johann Schmidt Junior were just trying to survive. Unaware of the atrocities committed in Hitler's name, but he felt the shift, the silence. Because when a man like Hitler dies, the world demands answers. And sometimes, it's the people who knew him before the rise who are the only ones who truly understand the fall. Today, the Hitler family seems more like a shadow, a name people speak of occasionally, but never truly. See, a few remain alive too in Austria, 3 in the US, but there are no children, no legacy, no desire to be found. And maybe that's the way it could end. But if you were born with that name, would you have erased yourself too? Let us know in the comments.